Megan, it's incredibly difficult for survivors to even step foot here in the Oregon District. And as you can see here behind me, the community is reclaiming that trauma through love. There's been people placing flowers, powerful musical performances, people sharing memories and discussing how to prevent mass shootings in our nation. And while 3 years have passed, the loss of those 9 lives will be present forever.
Bryn, there's heavy hearts tonight as local Ukrainians grasp onto their phones, anxiously awaiting text message updates from family and friends on the ground in Ukraine. As the death toll nears 200, they tell me they're left wondering if those messages could be the last.
Yes, well, Adam, during that press conference, police said that they were called to Marlowe's house 6 to 8 times over the past 5 years. And this Vandalia court affidavit says back in 2019, Marlowe entered a Vandalia residence and pointed a firearm at an individual who I'm told was renting the house at the time. This document says that Marlowe threatened this individual with deadly force and that the individual was able to escape, but Marlowe immediately fled the scene. The Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office tells me that Marlowe received up to 5 years of probation for that incident. They say that he was released back in February after spending 2 years on probation.
And Allison, what do we know tonight about Marlowe's extradition process from Kansas?
Yes, well, he's scheduled to appear again in court tomorrow morning to sign his release papers. And I reached out to the Butler Township Police Department asking how soon they expect him to return, and they never got back to me. But I did speak directly with the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office. While they don't know who will be picking Marlowe up, they say they do believe it will be Butler Township Police. And the Prosecutor's Office says that they never advertise when they're transporting suspects for safety purposes, but they do tell me as soon as Marlowe arrives here at the Montgomery County Jail that they'll have a better idea about when his grand jury court hearing will be scheduled. Back to you.
So are you guys really doing to implement this early intervention, because women are still being incarcerated?
There's a debate about that, and quite frankly, my experience leads me to believe that that's helpful.
4 years later, what has the impact been not having this hospital in the area?
It's been tragic because in this side of Dayton, in West Dayton, in Northwest Dayton, you have trauma, you have tragedy, you have people who are chronically ill.
If a woman tried to leave, what tactics would you use to keep her?
I'd make her owe me a lot of money, for one. Because all the dopes, they got strung out on the dope and all, they keep wanting more. Grabbed her by the throat, banged her head against the wall, you know, stuff like that.
Would you call these women out here slaves?
Well, yeah, it's still slavery, is what it is.
What do you think needs to be done about these websites? And does Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act kind of pose a hurdle in holding them accountable?
Section 230 needs to be, at the very least, updated. The idea behind the immunity that these platforms have comes from a time in the mid-1990s when the internet barely existed.
In a lot of your past interviews, you foreshadowed the violent act that we saw on the Capitol. Do you expect there to be more violent acts in the next coming weeks?
The answer is yes. Donald Trump is enjoying this, and Donald Trump will continue to blow this dog whistle to his MAGA supporters. Now, again, I've also said this when I was testifying before the House Oversight Committee. Donald Trump speaks in code.
Do you ever feel Logan, with you, guiding you?
The morning before his service, in a dream, he came to me and he was dressed in a suit and holding a big white box. And he said, "It's going to be a great day, Ma." And I can't get that vision out of my head.
If this lawsuit isn't successful, how do you expect Google to evolve and play a role in our society?
There's a lot of thinking to do about this. Congress and many state legislatures are weighing in with ideas for new laws. We've all recognized that this thing grew like a weed overnight.
Citizens across Ohio, they're calling for more police accountability, but police departments, they're underfunded. They say they need more support to go after the opioid epidemic, issues like human trafficking. What would you do to balance both sides?
I will restore the local government fund, which will allow local communities across Ohio to hire more cops and firefighters.
Is there an aspect of this act that you think is most critical for right here in Dayton and Ohio?
I really think the changing it from 18 to 21, but also checking back into juvenile, because when I look at that part of the bill, I think our loved ones we lost in Dayton could have been saved because his past history.
Has your agency been able to track the impact it's had in deterring the demand?
We don't have a robust way to track them longitudinally. Again, something that we are developing new strategies for. One of the things that has bothered me a little bit is I'm aware of a few instances where apparently the change in the law earlier this year has not gotten through, and they're still charging under the old law.
Megan, I sat down with one local Ukrainian whose parents arrived here in Dayton just yesterday. They tell me it's nothing short of a miracle, but explain so many other Ukrainians aren't as lucky. Just 2 weeks ago, Anastasia Nagel thought this moment may never come.
A lot of prayers were answered, and it was surreal. There they were on American soil, they were safe.
Nagel's parents were set to visit Dayton when the first airstrike signified the beginning of Russia's war in Ukraine. Her mother, Larissa, tells me they made it to Dayton thanks to an already approved travel visa and the help of Polish citizens smuggling them across the border.
It's very difficult to see how so much people, not only women with babies, but kids and
say goodbye to their husbands.
They say goodbye to their husbands.
They fled to a city in the western Ukraine. That city got bombed today. So, they're escaping the war from the east and north, but it's catching up to them.
Nagel and Tetiana Hupska, who also has family in Ukraine, say more pressure on Russia is desperately needed. They're now calling on NATO to establish a no-fly zone in Ukraine as bombs indiscriminately target civilians.
They need bulletproof vests, they need combat helmets, they need tourniquets, they need survival kits, backpacks, night vision, they need the goggles.
Russia's also paying mercenaries, battle-hardened fighters from Syria that effectively Putin propped up Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria, and now some of those troops that have been fighting for the last decade are now going to move into Ukraine. That's a very dangerous situation. So this is already beginning to escalate.
As local Ukrainians call for boots on the ground to prevent World War III, foreign policy expert Dr. Glenn Dorr explains it may instead provoke it, but says what actions the world takes this month is critical.
Certainly there could be a lot more in terms of sanctions.
And Ukrainians tell me global democracy is on the line right now, and they're calling this war a genocide against their people. That's why they're calling on the U.S. to fast-track the approval of already submitted visa applications so more Ukrainian families can be reunited right here in the States. Reporting live in Dayton, Allison Walker, Dayton 24, 7 Now News.
From runaway, we need to get away from that a little bit. We need to take a look at each case individually.
Most kids who are in the foster care system who typically run away regularly are our most vulnerable population. They're the ones that are at most risk for being exploited by traffickers.
I met up with Sergeant Dana Hess, the director of the Central Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force in Franklin County, a jurisdiction with the highest rates of missing children reports in Ohio.
That they're running from something, and we're trying to figure out what are they running from, because clearly the system that we have in place right now, it's not working because the kids just keep running away over and over. Even when we work together with the U.S. Marshals and we recover that child, we need to know there's a place that we can take them that's safe, where they're going to get the help that they need. And that doesn't always happen.
Having a degree does not make you perfect. It does not make you know everything, and it does not affect your ethical standards.
This is not a willy-nilly kind of thing. This isn't somebody just walks in the door and some sort of surgery is scheduled the next day.
ACLU Ohio says the bill is one of several in the State House based on politics, not policy, that's targeting human rights to appeal to voters. Now Castle says Ohio is falling behind in protecting LGBTQ+ rights across the board, as there are still no laws preventing trans housing and employment discrimination.
If you could say anything to the representatives proposing this legislation, what would you say?
The people that are putting this legislation into place are going to have the lives of LGBTQ+ children on their hands.
Molly Cruz was trafficked in downtown Dayton in her early 20s. Now a survivor, she volunteers with Sidewalk Soldiers, an organization of women who head to the hotels and motels they were once trafficked in hopes to help exploited girls. But this pandemic has made it harder to find them.
There's not very much street activity. It's all moved inside.
Esther Flores with One Divine Line to Health describes victims of human trafficking as living in the Shadowlands. She founded the only non-banker hours health-based organization in Columbus that heads to the hot zones, so I headed there with them.
So are some of these guys that you run into trafficking these women out here?
Absolutely. I mean, we pull up a lot of times, and so this group of guys that are standing over here, and they're going to either bully her out of her drugs, or they're going to beat her up, or both, and sexually assault her, whatever they've got to do.
We reached a dozen victims, some locals, others from across Ohio and the nation. One, who I'll call Adele, agreed to tell me her story.
I've been on the street since I was 14, but they used to put me out there on the block and teach me how to do this and do that and tell me to bring my money back to them.